was delighted to become an education investment area, seeking a new 16 to 19 specialist school. But I am still waiting, Mr. Speaker, for Wave 15 of the free school programme to be announced so I can bid for the long overdue free school in Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Torque. We need to improve academic outcomes and destinations. When is that coming?
Well, my honourable friend always champions his area passionately, and I recognise the strong bid he's put in. Of course, the educational investment areas provide that opportunity to have extra free school provision within them.
Sherman.
Mr. Speaker, has the Secretary of State seen the latest report from the Autism Commission, which I co-chair, in which it focuses not only on autism, but the impact on that individual throughout life and the family who has autism? And does he realise it is his failure to get a statement, to get an assessment for years and years that is causing so much unhappiness in those families?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I certainly recognise some of the challenges that the Honourable Gentleman references. The Sen review will be published in the coming days, and the Honourable Gentleman may have questions. Following on from that, I'd be very happy to meet with him to discuss it further.
We now come to the urgent question. I call Crispin Blunt.
Mr. Speaker, to ask the Government if it make a statement on the executions in Saudi Arabia this weekend.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are shocked by the execution of 81 individuals on the 13th of March. The United Kingdom strongly opposes the death penalty in all countries and in all circumstances as a matter of principle. The UK Ambassador has already raised UK's strong concerns with the Saudi National Security Advisor and their Vice Foreign Minister. We will continue to raise UK concerns with Saudi counterparts through our ministerial and diplomatic channels and seek further clarification on the details of these cases. No aspect of our relationship with Saudi Arabia prevents us from speaking frankly about human rights. Saudi Arabia remains a Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office human rights priority country, including because of the use of the death penalty and restrictions on women's rights, freedom of expression and freedom of religion or belief. We regularly raise concerns with the Saudi authorities through diplomatic channels, including ministers, our ambassador and our British embassy.
We now come to Crispin Blunt.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for granting this urgent question, which itself recognises the execution of 81 men on one day as of profound concern to this House and to our country, which has so many shared interests with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Does my right honourable friend agree that this represents a new low for human rights and criminal justice in the Kingdom, coming only a week after the Crown Prince had promised to modernise the Saudi justice system? A decade ago, as a Justice Minister, I supported government-to-government work to help Saudi Arabia modernise its justice system as we work to build a strong and positive partnership with the Kingdom. Can my right honourable friend confirm that emptying death row this way is not the kind of modernisation anyone would have had in mind when we signed off support to Saudi Arabia in happier times? Does my right honourable friend recognise the exquisite difficulties that this has presented to our Prime Minister? What assurances will he be seeking from Saudi Arabia in respect of human rights on his next visit there? Will he at least seek an assurance that execution of those arrested for alleged crimes when children will cease? Will he make clear to the Crown Prince how appalled friends of the Kingdom are, particularly in light of the state's assassination of Jamal al-Khashoggi only 3 years ago? Does my right honourable friend think these events have been the behaviour of a friend?
I thank my honourable friend. I'll try and take these points in turn. The UK's relationship with Saudi Arabia is of great importance, ranging from kind of national security to economic interests. But that nature of our relationship does mean that we can speak frankly about human rights. And as I said in my opening remarks, the United Kingdom strongly opposes the death penalty in all countries and in all circumstances as a matter of principle. And Saudi Arabia is well aware of the UK's opposition to use the death penalty. As I say, we raise these concerns with the authorities through a range of ministerial and diplomatic channels. And regarding the juvenile death penalty, we raised concerns with the Saudi authorities regarding the juvenile death penalty application. And regarding Khashoggi, the UK has always been clear that his murder was a terrible crime. We condemn his killing in the strongest possible terms, which is why we've sanctioned 20 Saudi nationals involved in the murder under the global human rights regime.
Minister Bambuck-Torrell.
We on this side of the House are appalled and utterly condemn the execution of 81 Saudi men on Saturday. Saturday's massacre is the largest execution in Saudi Arabia's history, and we do not believe that the timing of the executions was coincidental, taking place whilst the world is focusing its attention on atrocities elsewhere. Referring to the killings, the Interior Ministry stated it won't hesitate to deter anyone who threatens security or disrupts public life. This demonstrates just how low the bar is for execution in the Kingdom, where individuals can be sentenced to death for protest-related offences or exercising their right to free speech. The mass execution comes in a week when the Prime Minister reportedly plans to travel to Riyadh to meet Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. We've seen what happens when human rights abuses go unchecked. So I ask the Minister what steps the government is taking to ensure that human rights are at the fore of any future trade deals with Saudi Arabia? And will the Prime Minister be expressing Parliament's outrage at this massacre when he meets the Crown Prince? And what assurances will the government be seeking to ensure that such mass executions carried out by a friendly country never happen again?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his questions. And as I say, we were deeply shocked by the execution of the 81 individuals on the 13th of March. And as I stated already, no aspect of our relationship with Saudi Arabia prevents us from speaking frankly about human rights. And we do regularly raise with Saudi authorities through diplomatic channels, including ministers and our ambassador and the embassy, our concerns in terms of human rights. As I said, it also remains the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office human rights priority country, particularly because of the use of the death penalty, as well as kind of restrictions on women's rights, freedom of expression and freedom of religion or belief. In terms, I'm not going to speculate in terms of Prime Minister's visits.
Sir John Redwood.
Doesn't this bad news reinforce the urgency of the UK producing more of its own oil and gas to reduce dependency on these powers? And couldn't that include onshore gas only where the local community and people are willing? And wouldn't that be speeded up if they were given a royalty?
In relation to this matter, it's important that all partners work together to ensure the stability in energy markets, and OPEC also has a key role to play here.
We now come to SNP spokesperson Alan Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a deep personal interest in Saudi Arabia. I grew up in Saudi Arabia. We spent much of the 80s in Riyadh. I'm a friend of Saudi with all the political issues that it has. And I'm glad to hear the Minister say that there's a frank dialogue with the Saudis about judicial matters, but it doesn't, I say this gently, seem to be having much of an effect on the Saudis themselves. And friends speak bluntly to friends, and executing in public by beheading 81 people, whatever their crime, whatever their alleged crime, is an atrocity. And there needs to be consequences beyond the harsh criticism. So I'd modestly suggest two. I note she's not going to speculate on the Prime Minister's visit, but she can relay the House's concern that surely the Prime Minister's visit next week should not go ahead. And there should be a consequence. And also, we have a programme of judicial and justice cooperation with the Saudis. Surely that has to end, or at least be suspended, pending the deep concern across all the House on each and every one of these cases. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm afraid that if I'm going to get asked multiple times about the Prime Minister's visits, colleagues are going to be disappointed because, as I say, I'm not going to speculate about the Prime Minister's visits. But what I would say, and as I've said in previous answers, our relationship with Saudi Arabia does mean that we can speak frankly about matters and human rights. As I said at the outset, You know, we were shocked by the execution of these 81 individuals, and our ambassador has raised strong concerns of the UK government with the Saudi National Security Advisor and their Vice Foreign Minister.
Fair Jones.
What happened in Saudi Arabia was a gross violation of human rights and places strain on global relationships, which are crucially important right now. Does the Minister agree with me that no country found to be complicit in human rights abuses, such as those we are currently seeing in Ukraine, should receive a penny of UK taxpayer money in international aid?
Yeah.
So I thank my honourable friend for her question. And I think this goes back to the fundamental point here, which human rights violations are something that we do raise. Where we see them, we are not ashamed. We will not stand back from actually raising these where they seem to happen.
Nadia Whitton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the UK government has given the Saudi regime an estimated $20 billion in arms sales since the start of the war in Yemen, despite clear breaches of humanitarian law. It's extremely likely that British weapons have been used to kill civilians. In light of the executions on Saturday, will the Prime Minister cancel his planned visit? And will this government do what it should have done long ago and end arms sales to the Saudi regime?
So I thank the honourable lady for her question. As I've said before, I suspect I've been saying a few times, I'm not going to preempt the Prime Minister's travel plans. In terms of arms exports, we take our strategic export control responsibilities very seriously. We examine every application on a case-by-case basis against very strict criteria. And we will not grant an export licence if we thought it was inconsistent with the strategic export licensing criteria, including respect for human rights and international humanitarian law.
Bob Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a boy, I witnessed 2 executions, one of them beheading in what is now called Yemen. I'm vehemently against the death penalty. Could I ask the Minister if the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office has any idea what percentage of the Saudi population actually is in favour of capital punishment?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. I'm afraid I don't have that answer specifically, but let's be really clear. The United Kingdom strongly opposes the death penalty in all countries and in all circumstances as a matter of principle.
Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In 2018, the Saudi Arabian government told the United Nations that if the crime committed by the juvenile is punishable by death, the sentence shall be reduced to a term of not more than 10 years detention. However, the following year, 6 young men sentenced to death for childhood crimes were executed, as was in 2019 Mustafa al-Dawish, having recanted a confession extracted under torture. The Minister says we can speak frankly to the Saudi Arabian government. Will she frankly say to the House of Commons now that the promise the government made to the United Nations that it would not execute minors for crimes committed when they were children was not made in good faith?
As I've mentioned in relation to the juvenile death penalty, the government raises concern with the Saudi authorities regarding the juvenile death penalty application, and we do very closely monitor these cases and routinely attempt to attend the trials. The Saudi Human Rights Commission announced a moratorium on the death penalty sentences for individuals who committed discretionary crimes as minors in April 2020.
James Gray.
Mr. Speaker, I strongly support the Minister's reluctance to speculate on the Prime Minister's travel arrangements. Absolutely right, she should do so. But should the Prime Minister happen to find himself in Saudi Arabia in the near future by chance, would she not agree with me that that would be a very good opportunity to make our points about this being an absolute human rights outrage in the strongest possible terms to the ruling party in Saudi Arabia?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving me the opportunity to kind of reiterate that I'm not going to speculate, and he understands why. But, you know, as I say, diplomats, ministers, all clearly have frank conversations regarding human rights with Saudi Arabia. And as I said at the outset, we were actually shocked by the executions at the weekend.
Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister may be shocked, but she shouldn't be surprised because this sort of thing has happened before, and actions do speak louder than words. If the Prime Minister goes in the next few days to Saudi Arabia, we will be sending a very clear signal that no matter what we say, we're not really bothered about this sort of thing. It is reported that we have a judicial cooperation memorandum of understanding with Saudi Arabia. Will the Minister commit to publishing that, along with the human rights risk assessment made by the Government in relation to it?
I think, coming back to the kind of key point in this, is that given our relationship with Saudi Arabia, we are able to have those frank conversations about human rights. We are opposed to the death penalty in all countries under all circumstances. And as I said earlier on, Saudi Arabia does remain a Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office human rights priority country, particularly because of the use of the death penalty.
Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Saudi Arabia has, at best, an ambiguous relationship with revolutionary Islamism. Can the government and the minister confirm that in seeking to lessen our dependence upon one source of oil and gas, we do not end up creating a source dependency on another unreliable and sometimes hostile regime?
Referring to this particular issue, I think the key point here is that it's important that all partners and international partners work together to ensure the stability of energy markets.
Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mass executions are particularly grotesque and barbaric, but there's no due process in the Saudi justice system, a widespread use of torture. 75% of those executed were for non-lethal offences. Will she specifically answer about the case of Abdullah al-Hawaiti, again a juvenile when the alleged offence was committed, on death row, awaiting execution at the moment? She's known about that case for months. What representations has she made to the Saudi authorities, and what does she intend to do about that now?
So, I've been clear in terms of our opposition to the death penalty. We raise a number of different cases with the Saudi authorities, but I would happily follow up in writing following this urgent question on that particular case.
Brendan O'Hara.
Speaker, the Greek writer Aesop once said that a man is known by the company that he keeps, and that equally applies to states. This week, while the Prime Minister's former friends in Moscow were committing atrocities in Ukraine, his existing friends in Riyadh were executing 81 people. It is obvious that the oft-repeated words of condemnation mean nothing. And isn't it time that the country, rather than cozying up to these regimes, completely resets its relationship with countries that do not share our values and who feel because of their wealth they can continue to trample over basic human rights with impunity?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. What I would say, actually, is given our relationship with Saudi Arabia, that we are able to have frank conversations about human rights.
Andy MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister confirm whether there is a memorandum of understanding on judicial cooperation between the United Kingdom and Saudi Arabia? And if so, will she publish it?
As I say, I think I've set out quite clearly the way, the various ways in which we raise kind of human rights with the Saudi Arabian authorities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I press the Minister? Does she not see any contradiction between rightly ending dependence on Putin's Russia for fossil fuels, but then seeking to replace them by going cap in hand to another murderous tyrant who executes his own people and to whom we sell arms that are being used to kill civilians in Yemen? Is she aware of reports in the US that Saudi Arabia is pressurizing President Biden to repay for access to oil by supplying more military support for their war in Yemen? And can she assure us that this government would not tolerate a more arms for oil deal with this murderous regime?
Minister.
So in terms of energy, I think it's, we do have, following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, rightly, we are having to phase out Russian oil, and which is absolutely the right thing to do. And so it's important that all partners work together to ensure the stability of the markets.
Tamanjit Singh Desi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There seems to be a bit of a pattern developing here. When the Deputy Prime Minister visited Saudi Arabia in June, the regime subsequently executed Mustafa al-Darwish, a child defendant convicted of protest-related offences. And now, days before the Prime Minister is due to go to speak business with the Saudi monarchy, the regime has executed 81 people. Does the Minister agree that the Saudi monarchy sees this UK government as a soft touch, as people that it can ignore, because ministers do not possess the backbone to stand up for British values and for human rights, and therefore the regime can go on to act with impunity and continue with its bloodshed?
Minister.
As I said on a number of different occasions, it's because of our relationship with Saudi Arabia that we are able to have very, very frank conversations about human rights. We were shocked by the execution at the weekend, and as I say, we do raise our concerns, and the ambassador has raised concerns with the Saudi National Security Advisor and their Vice Foreign Minister.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund a right and proper and fit-for-purpose owner of Newcastle United?
Minister.
So, the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund is a significant investor, having invested billions in the UK and other Western markets. It operates across a range of sectors. We welcome the purchase of Newcastle United and a sign that the UK remains a great place to invest.
How do you square that?
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our foreign policy, including our trade deals, must be underpinned by human rights and the rule of law. Would the Minister not agree that it is arguably the absence of this in our current foreign policy and our current international dealings which has led President Putin to feel that he can absolutely ignore all of this and do what he wants in Ukraine?
Minister.
So, let's be really clear. The international community in the UK have been absolutely clear throughout that the Russians' invasion of Ukraine was unprovoked, unjust and illegal. And we will do everything we can to limit Putin's ability to wage war. But on human rights, but let's be clear, we do call out human rights violations where we see them.
Cherry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm puzzled as to why the Minister is so shifty about the existence of this Memorandum of Understanding on Judicial Cooperation.
Can I just say, I'm not... Honourable lady, just sit down a second. Shifty, I'm not a comfortable word for the House to use, especially when it's a straight accusation of the Minister. Whatever we might think, I think with your good language from your court days, I'm sure we could come up with a nicer way.
Very happy to put it more politely, Mr. Speaker. I'm puzzled as to why the Minister is so evasive about the persistent questioning about the existence of this Memorandum of Understanding on Judicial Cooperation. If it doesn't exist, why doesn't she just say it doesn't exist? If it exists, why can't we see a copy? And why can't she tell us whether there's a human rights risk assessment and publish that?
Minister.
Well, I don't know how that being described as shifty, but Mr. Speaker. Anyway, look, I've been really clear in terms of what we do as a UK government in terms of raising human rights with the Saudi authorities. They remain a human rights priority country. And as I say, ministers and the ambassador all raise these concerns about human rights.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It may be one thing for the morally bankrupt Premier League to accept money from Saudi Arabia, but for the UK government to turn around and say it welcomes its investment is another thing. Our frank talking to Saudi Arabia has amounted to nothing more than diplomatic finger wagging and has created no change whatsoever in their attitudes. So can we expect, in response to this atrocity, any change at all in the relationship between the UK and Saudi Arabia?
Yeah. Minister.
As I've said on a number of different occasions during this urgent question, the relationship with Saudi is of great importance, covering a range of kind of national security and economic interests. But it's because of that relationship that we are able to have frank conversations about human rights.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I am wearing the colours of my football team, Newcastle United. And I think it's important to say that in utterly condemning this atrocious, horrific massacre, I speak for many, many of my constituents and Newcastle United fans. And does the Minister agree with me that whereas football fans have no control or influence over the ownership of their beloved clubs, and especially in a Premier League awash with dirty money, the UK government has both control and influence in who it trades with, in who it engages with? And will she tell us what she is going to do with that control and influence? She said what she's not going to do. What is she going to do? And is she going to make it absolutely clear that sports washing is not an option?
Minister.
So, with regards to Newcastle United, we've never had a role at any point in the club's prospective takeover, and this has been a commercial matter for the Premier League.
Kerry McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is all incredibly depressing. In 2012, when I was Shadow Minister for International Human Rights, I remember trying to ask questions about David Cameron's visit to Saudi Arabia, and it was like something out of Yes Minister, the responses. I kept being told nothing was off the table, or a wide range of issues was discussed, and it went on and on and on. Never got an answer. And now we hear that 2 years ago he went camping with Lex Greensill and the Saudi Crown Prince, which I think says a lot for what probably was discussed then. But can I ask the Minister, if the Prime Minister does go to Saudi next week, and I hope he doesn't, will he raise the case of Abdullah al-Hawati that was mentioned by my colleague from Hammersmith? 14-year-old at the time of the crime, was sentenced to death last week.
Minister.
I'm trying to think of another way to kind of suggest that I will not be speculating in terms of the Prime Minister's travel plans this week, next week or next month.
Peter Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite the Minister's protestations, nobody in this chamber believes that we would see the same weak response from this government if these murders had taken place in Iran, for example. Isn't it the case that because Saudi Arabia is Britain's single biggest weapons customer, because Britain is Saudi Arabia's single second biggest arms supplier, isn't it simply the case that whether it's weapons for murderers in Saudi Arabia or peerages for Russian oligarchs in London, for this Tory government, money talks louder than human rights ever will?
Minister.
Yeah. I've been pretty clear that the government was shocked by the execution of these 81 individuals at the weekend. I've also been clear that the UK opposes the death penalty in all countries under all circumstances as a matter of principle. And Saudi Arabia is well aware of the UK's opposition to use the death penalty.
Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Saudi authorities have said that these executions were carried out in compliance with Saudi law. So given that we know that the Saudi justice system falls far short of international standards, including obtaining confessions through torture, and the use of the Special Criminal Court for the prosecution of human rights defenders and political activists. What recent discussions has the government actually had with the Saudi authorities about the failings of the Saudi justice system and the cases of those in jail for trying to exercise their fundamental human rights?
So, as I say, we regularly raise concerns about human rights, but specifically Lord Ahmed, the Minister responsible for human rights, raised them during his visit to Saudi Arabia earlier in February.
Mike Kane.
Pope Francis recently said, Mr. Speaker, that the death penalty is an attack on the inviolability and dignity of the human person, inadmissible in all cases. Following on from the member for Beckenham, there are 1.7 million Catholics who live in Saudi Arabia, 8% of the population. King Salman has already got cordial relationships with the Church, and the Crown Prince recently visited the Archbishop of Canterbury to talk about inter-religious dialogue. What pressure can we put on civil societies groups to explain to the royal family there that many of their constituents, many of their people do not believe in the death penalty, and give them an understanding as to why we don't believe in it?
Minister.
And I think the UK government and partners do kind of raise human rights issues and also our opposition to the death penalty. As I've said, the UK strongly opposes the death penalty. Saudi Arabia remains on the human rights priority country, and that is in part because of the use of the death penalty, but also restrictions on of women's rights, freedom of expression, and also freedom of religion and belief.
Alan Dorrans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon. Mr. Speaker, last week the Minister for Defence Procurement was in Riyadh at the World Defence Show, actively promoting the UK arms export to the Saudi regime. Does the Minister agree that in light of the weekend's mass executions, the UK government should seize all arms trades with a regime that shows no sign of respecting human rights?
So regarding arms exports, as I've said in an earlier answer, we do have very strong criteria by which we examine every application, and we will not grant an export licence if it's inconsistent with the strategic export licensing criteria, including in respect of human rights and international humanitarian law.
Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister's said many times now the government makes representations and has frank discussions. Can she point to a single example of any impact or effect of those representations?
Minister.
So if I just take one example, in terms of this weekend, let's be really clear. The UK ambassador has already raised our UK's strong concerns with the Saudi National Security Advisor and their Vice Foreign Minister. But we do raise our concerns with the Saudi authorities, and Lord Ahmed raised human rights concerns during his visit last month.
Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To what extent does the Minister personally think it is appropriate to continue to sell arms to the brutal Saudi regime, which has no regard for human rights of even their own people, publicly crucifying men after beheading them for homosexuality and stoning to death any woman deemed to have committed adultery?
I think I've answered the question in relation to arms exports on a number of occasions, so I refer back to previous answers.
Margaret Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The European Saudi Organisation for Human Rights said that in the cases it had been able to document, the charges involved not a drop of blood, even under Saudi rules used to establish criteria justifying executions. Opacity in the Saudi judicial system and witness intimidation lend further secrecy to the nature of the charges against the executed, many of whom are believed to have been Shias. What material steps, not conversations, material steps are the government taking to show Saudi Arabia that they will not tolerate these barbaric abuses?
As I said, we were shocked by the executions, and we have raised our concerns, and through our ministerial and diplomatic channels we will seek further clarification on the details of these cases.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Can I thank the Minister for her reply, declare an interest as Chair of the APPG of freedom of religious belief and express concern over the restrictions in religious beliefs in Saudi Arabia. These executions are deplorable and shock the people of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Has the Minister made any representations to their Saudi counterparts to review the rationale behind this mass execution and whether we can apply any diplomatic pressure to urge a reconsideration of executions carried out in this way and which appear to be a spectacle rather than the murderous, sombre, sober and shocking event that it truly is?
Minister.
I'm grateful for the honourable gentleman for his question, and I know how passionately he campaigns on all matters of freedom of religion or belief. As I've said, the UK ambassador has already raised our strong concerns about the executions at the weekend, and through ministerial and diplomatic channels we will seek further clarification on the details of these cases.